Sir Edward, it is a rare but enormous pleasure to appear before you in this debate. And I want at the outset to thank the Honourable Member for Bradford West for securing what has been an excellent debate with, across both sides of the House, some extremely important and helpful and interesting and well-informed interventions. And I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to respond. It's a great pleasure to hear from all those who've spoken, in particular my honourable friend from Congleton, who makes such a contribution on these important matters. And I will come directly to several of the points that she raised. It's also a pleasure to be debating this with the Honourable Lady, the member for Bethnal Green and Bow, who, as she's pointed out, when I was on the back benches, she and I worked constructively and with great enthusiasm together, and indeed have done so since she shadowed me when I was the Secretary of State for International Development. And my honourable friend for Strangford, whose contributions always enliven our debates and make sure that we focus on these absolutely critical positions of religious freedom. Can I also say to the honourable gentleman for Bradford East that he spoke with authority and conviction on the appalling treatment of the Rohingya community, and I will come very directly to that. If I can also say that the Honourable Lady from Airdrie and Shotts spoke eloquently about these same issues. And I will come directly to the Shadow Minister's points towards the end of my remarks. I would like to thank all members for the efforts to maintain a spotlight on the appalling human rights situation which exists in Myanmar. I have been there on several occasions, in opposition, Sir Edward, and also in government, where I spent a day campaigning with Aung San Suu Kyi in her constituency, and indeed had the great honour of introducing her to the largest crowd I have ever addressed in my political career. More than 2 years since the coup, the armed forces have seized power. The people of Myanmar continue to suffer terribly at their hands. The regime's atrocities are increasingly brutal. Indiscriminate airstrikes are more frequent, as are reports of mass burnings of homes and villages. Conflict-related deaths in Myanmar last year were second only to Ukraine. Gender and sexual-based violence is rife. Sir Edward, only last week, the military carried out the deadliest airstrike against civilians since the coup, killing more than 160 people in Sagaing. This followed a devastating airstrike on the 10th of April in Chin State, which killed at least 11 citizens. The targeting of civilian infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, and places of worship, is absolutely grotesque and appalling and must cease immediately. Civilians must be protected and human rights must be respected. Basic human rights have come under attack in many ways across Myanmar. More than 17,000 people are detained arbitrarily, including politicians like Aung San Suu Kyi, journalists, students, lawyers, medics, and protesters. Last July, death sentences were carried out for the first time in 30 years. Civic space is all but closed and further threatened by a new, highly restrictive organisation registration law. Only recently, the military regime dissolved 40 political parties, including Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy. This further underscores their assault on the rights of the Myanmar people. This brutal campaign of atrocities is plunging the country ever deeper into political, economic, and humanitarian crisis. More than 17 million people are now in need of humanitarian assistance, and over 1.8 million have had to flee their homes. And the consequences, Sir Edward, for regional stability and security are clear. The countries around Myanmar house a third of the world's population. Through our partners, we are assisting those in need on the borders with Bangladesh, Thailand, China, and India. The Rohingya communities in Myanmar's Rakhine state are some of the most vulnerable, as we heard so eloquently portrayed by the honourable gentleman for Bradford. We are now nearly 6 years on from the horrific violence the Rohingya communities suffered in 2017, and over 10 years on from the violence of 2012. Last month, my Right Honourable friend, the Minister for Asia and member for Berwick-upon-Tweed, visited the Rohingya refugee camps in Cox's Bazar, Bangladesh, where she witnessed the difficult living conditions firsthand. And her observations and learning from that visit inform the policy of the Foreign Office. Rohingya communities continue to face systemic discrimination. Access to services is often blocked by the military regime. They are denied citizenship, freedom of movement, and access to education and healthcare, leaving them vulnerable to human trafficking. We've seen a tragic increase in Rohingya people attempting risky journeys to third countries, with too many lives lost at sea. More than 3,500 desperate Rohingya attempted deadly sea crossings in the Andaman Sea and the Bay of Bengal last year, a 360% increase on the year before. And sadly, there is no sign of a solution. The worsening situation in Myanmar means conditions for the voluntary, safe, dignified and sustainable return of the Rohingya are not in place. Now, I turn now directly to the UK action and indeed to the international response. The UK is committed to ending the human rights crisis in Myanmar. Since the coup, we've been at the forefront of a strong, coordinated international response to the military regime's brutal oppression of its own people. In December, we led efforts to secure and pass the first ever UN Security Council resolution on the situation in Myanmar. It urges all parties to respect human rights, demands an end to violence, and urges the military regime to release all those arbitrarily detained. And our targeted sanctions regime restricts the regime from accessing the money, arms, and equipment it needs to carry out these atrocities. We have already sanctioned 20 individuals and 29 entities. Most recently, this includes companies and individuals who supply fuel to the Myanmar Air Force, enabling its barbaric air campaign. We're also targeting the military junta, including the Office of the Chief of Military and Security Affairs, through these sanctions. Since the coup, we provided more than 100 million in humanitarian assistance. This includes making sure the most vulnerable still have access to health and education and supporting human rights defenders. And I'll say some more about the funding in a moment. Delivering through local organisations, we're able to reach directly communities that are often hard to reach. And we remain committed to supporting the Rohingya. Since 2017, the UK has provided over 25 million for the Rohingya and other Muslim communities in Rakhine State. And we thank the government of Bangladesh for their continued effort to support the Rohingya community. Humanitarian assistance alone cannot solve this crisis. We continue to engage with partners to encourage dialogue, find a peaceful resolution, and support a return to democracy. We will use all available opportunities, including at the G7 and with our ASEAN partners, to push for this. We will also use our role as penholder at the UN Security Council to keep the situation in Myanmar high on the agenda. And through accountability, we have the possibility of ending the military's culture of impunity and prevent future atrocities. And justice must be delivered for victims. Last year, the UK government announced our intention to intervene in the International Court of Justice case brought by the Gambia regarding Myanmar's obligations under the Genocide Convention. We have also established the Myanmar Witness Programme, which reports on some of the most egregious human rights violations. And we have provided £500,000 to the independent investigative mechanism for Myanmar to preserve evidence of atrocities for future prosecution. I want, if I may, to say a word or two, Sir Edward, specifically on the spending, because although we are enormously constrained, particularly during this financial year, the position, I'm pleased to be able to reassure honourable members, is not as bad as was suggested. We have increased spending since the coup and spent £100 million. That is, in 21-22, 45.8 million inside Myanmar, and last year, 57.3 million. And since 2017, as I explained, we are spending over £25 million in Rakhine State in Myanmar, and we are the second largest funder since 2017, and we have spent £350 million bilaterally supporting the Rohingya in Bangladesh. That's over £250 million. And that, of course, takes no account, Sir Edward, of the multilateral funding which we do through the World Food Programme and through OCHA and through the ICRC. So I hope that my honourable friends and honourable members across the House will accept that the position is immensely constrained, but that we are spending an enormous amount of British taxpayers' money on this very important and needy issue. And I give way with pleasure to the honourable lady.
Well, to him for giving way, but he hasn't really answered the question, which is when is he going to be able to restore the funding to the level that it was? And there is a real terms cut. I appreciate the aggregate he's mentioned, and of course that's very much appreciated. But the reality is he does need to do more to restore the funds. It's a major humanitarian crisis, and Bangladesh shouldn't be left, and INGOs and international agencies shouldn't be left to their own devices to deal with these cuts.
Well, I obviously very much appreciate what the Honourable Lady is saying, but I would say to her that when we come to make decisions on funding, we don't look at the issue of restoring the money, we look at the issue of need, and I can tell her this, that we will always take account of the need. That is why we have spent over £350 million, £250 million, inside Bangladesh supporting the Rakhine, and it is precisely because of the Rohingya, and that is precisely because of the eloquent reasons which she put to us. Can I also say to her on this subject that while this year's budget is very stretched, we will try and expect to be able to maintain the same coverage in the water, sanitation and hygiene programme for the Rohingya in the camps that we have done in the past, and I'm sure that she will welcome that very much. Can I turn to my honourable friend for Congleton and what she said, and pay tribute to her as the envoy for the PM on freedom and religion or belief. And indeed, she occupies the office next door to me in King Charles Street, Sir Edward. So we'll be sure to keep Foreign Office ministers up to the mark. What she said about the treatment of the Reverend Sampson is absolutely right, and his treatment is disgraceful. And His Majesty's government calls for the release of the Reverend Sampson and of all those who are arbitrarily detained. And she spoke also about our friend Ben Rogers, with whom I visited Myanmar when we were in opposition. And I want to pay tribute today in this debate, Sir Edward, to Ben Rogers' wise and expert testimony and to the extraordinary way in which he has dedicated so much of his life to helping those who are living in an environment without religious freedom and where so many are arbitrarily detained. And finally, if I may just return to the excellent speech made by the opposition spokesman. She's raised a number of matters. Can I first of all say that there is no support from the embassy in Yangon for this illegal and pariah regime. So let us be in no doubt about that. In respect of the individual to whom she and others referred to in the United Kingdom, their rights are obviously governed by the conventions, and in particular the diplomatic conventions which apply, and as she would expect, we live within those particular rules. And in view of the concern which she and others expressed on the subject of aviation fuel and insurance, I will have a look again to check that we are doing everything we are able to do on those matters, and I will write to her if I have anything to add to what I have said in the debate. Of course.
I thank him for his excellent response to all the matters raised here, in particular freedom of religion or belief and the question of the Cox's Bazar and the 1 million people in the refugee camp, which I know my honourable friend from Bethnal Green and Bow will raise with him later in an ongoing way. But could I press him on that important symbolism of stripping away the diplomatic role which that military attaché has, based here in Wimbledon, having freedoms that so many enjoy who do not enjoy that same freedom in Myanmar because of his government. Will he review what more can be done in stripping away that legitimacy which we are affording that individual?
And I will indeed, Sir Edward, and I will bring my remarks to a close. On the latter point that she has made, of course, as she has raised it in this debate, we will have a careful look to see if anything further can be done. And if there is anything further, well, I will write to her anyway on the answer to that question. The people of Myanmar, Sir Edward, have shown great determination and resilience in the face of unspeakable atrocities. They continue to demonstrate their commitment to democracy, human rights and fundamental freedoms, and we continue to stand with them. We will do all we can to ensure that in the future they can live safely and in peace, something which is comprehensively denied to them today.
Thank you, Sir Edward. Thank you.